Rogério Ceni, Ollie, the Brazilian goalkeeper. This will blow the mind of our younger listeners. Guess how many goals he scored in his career? He was Chilavert on steroids, right? 132. Hot take, Zidane's goal against Leverkusen in a Champions League final is slightly overrated.
Building up. This golf season is preparing to be, regardless of all the crap that's happening with Liv and the PGA, it's building up to be a really good year of great golf.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pods, episode 34, I believe, with myself, David, and a rather croaky Mr. Oliver Wilson. He'll explain all in a moment. I'm sure he's watching sport till the small hours of the morning. Ollie, a busy pod as always, mate. I want to talk about the Premier League title race. Can you call it a run-in with 13 games to go? I think you can. If Arsenal win the league without a forward line to speak of, how great an accomplishment would it be? Ruben Amorim, always on the agenda. As Postecoglou's great comeback starts now. I want to talk about the possibility, Ollie, in this podcast, of 7 English clubs competing in the Champions League next season, because that could actually happen. Burnley have only conceded 11 goals in the league. Ollie, you flagged this weeks or months ago, this trend, and I kind of ignored it a little bit, but it's finally inescapable. 11 league goals they've conceded all season. I mean, could it be the best ever in English football? What else? Harry Kane's got a £67 million release clause. I think Premier League clubs will be interested in that over the summer. Jude Bellingham got sent off for Real Madrid. Yannick Sinner, the world number 1 tennis player, has been banned for 3 months for doping. It's probably the most convenient drugs ban in history because he doesn't miss a slam. It's the equivalent of someone missing the Community Shield but being fit for the first day of the Premier League season. And it's also like, well, we'll dig into it. We'll dig into it.
Much like Yannick Sinner, just plug this podcast into my veins and let's get juiced up and ready to go on all the sport to discuss.
It's odd because apparently he ingested this contaminated substance, clostebol, via a massage. Now I don't know what kind of massages Yannick Sinner's had. Anyway, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this. Is my very, very elongated intro to Not Another Sports Pod. I got the pleasure of spending a Monday morning virtually opposite Mr. Oliver Wilson. Ollie, how are you, mate? How did you sleep?
I'm growing more and more envious of your brick wall background every single day. Spain's Airbnbs are treating you far too well for podcasting, and I like to think that you have actually been on an Airbnb kind of pre-going out and gone, right, that's not a good enough background, can't stay there. That's not a good enough background, can't stay there. Ooh, the 2 alcoves, the 2 white alcoves with the brick background in the middle and just above them. That might be the one.
You're
sure,
dangerously close to the truth, Mr. Wilson.
If you turn the camera around, I'm imagining like the toilet is next to the kitchen. It's an absolute mess of a place, but the podcast background in the corner is what the whole Airbnb has been sold for to Dave Windsor. And I think that just shows the lengths that we're willing to go, including, bad nights of sleep because I was just too again excited and juiced up to get to sleep after a thrilling end to the PGA Tour this weekend. Loads to get into.
Do you think about sport when you go to sleep? I don't want to correct you.
I dream about sport. I dream about work and sport and both. I had a dream the other day. This is going to be very boring.
There's nothing more boring in the world, by the way, than someone else telling you about their dreams. But yeah, let's go for it. That's great life advice for anyone. The minute you're about to tell someone, I had a weird dream last night, stop immediately. It's almost as bad as someone saying, you had a haircut, mate. Those are my 2 least favourite phrases in the English language.
If unless it's your partner. If it's your partner, you have to just ride the dream chat through. You have to let them get that off the chest because you might have done something bad in the dream that they're just getting off their chest. They don't take it out on you in about 3 hours time when it's still super kind of boring around in their brain.
I totally take your point, but it's still, no matter who says it, your nearest and dearest, your loved ones, the people you want to spend your entire life with, hearing about someone's dream is devastating.
All right, I get it. You don't want to hear the dream story. It's fine. No. I'm going to change it then because you said 11 goals conceded by Burnley in the Championship this year. It's not even that. It's 9. It's 9 goals. Single figures at this point in a Sky Bet Championship season. And I'd almost be tempted. I know we've got loads of Premier League to get into and everything. But I would be tempted to say we should kick off with what's happening in the Sky Bet Championship. Because we're on the verge of like absolute greatness at this point with what this Burnley side is doing. And I don't think... I can't see a way that it doesn't happen because... they are so good at keeping a clean sheet to the point that every time I'm doing a game and we go to the half-time and full-time scores around the grounds, Burnley haven't conceded, and I've just started making like cheap gags and jokes about it of like, well, of course there's going to be a 0 in the column somewhere on Burnley's sheet, and it's obviously defensively they've not conceded again. It's just that they can't find a goal against Preston North End, and if they scored 10 more goals this season, they're so bad going forward because they haven't got a decent Sky Bet Championship striker where you need like that lively, aggressive, really punchy centre forward. You can't rely on Jay Rodriguez at 34 years old to bag 25 goals in that division. And if they had that centre forward, it wouldn't even be close. It would be a canter to the top of the table and to the Premier League next season.
We need a drinking game.
It's the best way for them to go up.
We need a drinking game where anytime Ollie says Sky Bet Championship, you take a shot and you'll be hammered by 9:30 on a Monday morning. I love it, Ollie. One of our listeners messaged in and said, I love how on brand Ollie Wilson is with the Sky Bet Championship.
That's one of the few criticisms. I don't check Twitter very often. It's one of the few criticisms I've seen of one of my commentaries this year of somebody going, "Oh, he keeps on calling it the Sky Bet Championship." I was like, well, that's kind of what it's called, unfortunately, mate. They've paid a lot of money for it to be that way. So I'm staying on brand with the EFL.
I rate it.
The Sky Bet League 1 and Sky Bet League 2. We're in the Carabao Cup. We're in the Versu Trophy semi-final stages. I mean, look, let the brands make their money, and maybe if they want to throw us a sponsorship deal, the Sky Bet NASP podcast, I think that works well.
I'll tell you what, Ollie, let's squeeze in 3 to 4 minutes of Burnley chat now before we go Premier League. The reason I had number 11 in my mind is because it's Burnley have kept 11 league clean sheets in a row, I think, and they've conceded 9 goals. So how is this comparable to other defensive masterclasses in the history of English football? Well, the one that should spring to anyone's mind around our age, I would have thought, would be the Jose Mourinho Chelsea defence in the 2004-2005 season, where they conceded 15 league goals all season, which is, in the Premier League, is absolutely bonkers. And I think we've done this before, not another sports pod, but it was such an impressive defence that even myself, as a complete non-Chelsea fan, same with lots of other people, could probably name that back five, which is crazy, isn't it? Petr Cech in goal, John Terry, Carvalho, Ferreira, I think the Portuguese lad, was the right back. And was it Wayne Bridget left back? Or there was maybe one other that came into that back five. But essentially, that was the core, right?
Yeah. And then
Makelele in front.
Makelele just sat in front of them. That was the big thing for me with that Chelsea side. It's like that defence barely got tested anyway because Makelele's just swarming all over in front of them, which he's just a brush that's sweeping everything under the carpet, and anything that does stay, the Hoover of those four. It's very simple indeed. And I think that's the crazy thing about this Burnley side is how few attempts on goal they actually end up facing during this season and during games. I mean, it's ridiculous. No team has had more than 3 shots on target against them in any game in the Championship this season. So it's not a case of, dogged defending. You don't get to shoot. They just don't allow you. It is so Italian Catenaccio. And if Juventus were winning Serie A right now in this manner, everyone would go rubbish. And I think there's more than one way to skin a cat in there. So, I think it's great. If you win football games that way, and that's the way that you can win and be successful, defending is an art, and it's a lost art in football. We hear that all the time. So this should be lauded as one of the greatest achievements ever if they can.
Only if they go up, Ollie.
I'm looking at
the Championship table now, mate, and they're third behind Sheffield United and Leeds United. Yeah, they've only conceded 9 league goals. It's incredibly impressive, right? But the point of football is to score goals. They've only scored 39 goals in 33 games. I agree, if they go up, then it's a masterclass. But if they go into the playoffs and don't go up, then what really was it? I mean, that Jose Mourinho side that conceded 15 league goals all season in the Premier League, they went on to win the Premier League. So,
yeah, you have Didier Drogba. It makes life a lot easier, doesn't it? If you can find somebody like that. And I think that is the big caveat to it. Is it's incredible, but if they don't go up, I mean, it's the same as when the Golden State Warriors won the most games in a regular season. They usurped Michael Jordan's 1995 Chicago Bulls, but you can win all the regular season games you want. If you don't win the NBA Finals, everyone remembers that season for you lost the NBA Finals. And it is going to be like this. If they don't go up, you can't get 0-0 through the playoffs because you'll get caught out in a penalty shootout or in the playoff final in a penalty shootout. You have to find a way to score goals. And I'm frankly pretty surprised with all the disparity you get now in the Championship with the parachute payments, the money that you bring down from the Premier League anyway. There is starting to be a case of the haves and have-nots. And we're seeing that with the fact that the sides that tend to go down will tend to go back up again, or at least be very close to going back up over the last few years. That that dynamic has really crept into this division. I'm very surprised that they didn't just go all out on anybody. I mean, you've been hearing all week about all these free agency players that Arsenal should sign. Somebody was saying, go and get Diego Costa.
Diego Costa was just in my head. I thought it was crazy.
Which, and it was mental.
Just go and get Roque Santa Cruz if you're going to do that.
But if Burnley went out and got Diego Costa, I'd be like, that is a stroke of genius. Because in the Championship, he mops it up. You say, look, we're going to pay you 90 grand a week in the Championship. We're going to be the highest paid Championship player that we've got, but we're also going to triple that salary if you get us the goals that get us to go up. Diego Costa's not turning that one down, is he? I mean, crikey, go and get Hulk as from Atletico Mineiro, like that, him roaming around the Sky Bet Championship as like a Brazilian Akinfenwa almost would be fantastic. But I do think what you're seeing is genuinely a piece of greatness. The most clean sheets in the EFL season is currently held at 27. Burnley already have 24. James Trafford's got 23 clean sheets in a season. The most, second most by any goalkeeper. John Ruddy and Paddy Kenny in 2018 and 2011 have 24 in a regular season. So, like we're talking about so many great records for goalkeepers and defenders are on very much the cusp of being decimated. And there's a long way to go yet in this Championship season. We've got 14 games still to go. I mean, the fact that this is being talked about after 33 games. And it's disgusting at the same time that you can only then score 39 goals in 33 games. That's, as I say, the thing that's going to needle Burnley fans more than anything else is that if it wasn't just Jay Rodriguez, they would be well away with this league because they're only 5 points off the top.
Ollie, I was going to squeeze this in later in the pod in the kind of games gone section, but I'd like to include it now because it feeds into the Ollie Wilson enthusiasm for defending. Something that's happened to the sports in the last 5 years, I would say. And I've been watching football, and we both have for probably 30 plus years now. But defenders celebrating tackles. When did this come in? What is it, and why does it exist? Because I've got a theory, my friend. So if you watch any kind of football these days, especially in the Premier League, I think this has been popularised by the two Arsenal centre-backs. But if there's like a great block or a great challenge, they will kind of celebrate and G up the crowd and punch their fist. And maybe it's always been in the game a little bit, but I swear I've seen it now more than ever before. To the point where I feel like, here's my theory of why it exists. Because of VAR, you can no longer truly celebrate a goal, but you can possibly still truly celebrate a tackle. And so, because that's been taken away from the players, that they cannot 100% commit to celebrating a goal because there's always the danger that 3 minutes earlier there was an offside or a foul. But a clean tackle that you know won't be overruled, you know is not going to result in a goal or a penalty given against you, you can really sort of G up the crowd and get pumped up for that. So players celebrating, defenders specifically celebrating tackles. Did it always exist, mate, or am I just a grumpy old man?
Yeah, it's been there. I mean,
you wouldn't get Maldini doing it, though.
Yeah, but Maldini was pure class. You know what I mean? Like, Maldini wouldn't even... Because he'd look at it as going, making that great tackle is my, like, mid-level. You know, if I do something very special, like playing a 50-yard through ball over the top, that's when I'm celebrating at the peak and providing goals. Maldini would see that as, well, that's just the level you defend at in this Milan side. I think it's always been there because you get great challenges that are last-minute ditch defending and stuff like that. But actually, it's normally been other players. Other players would see a piece of heroic defending and come up and be like, come on. And actually, more often than not, you'd have the defender who made the challenge being like, lock in, lads, lock in. Like, you know, they'd be buzzing from it, but they wouldn't let that adrenaline out in that way. They'd almost take... It's the same as a goalkeeper saving a penalty. You don't see a goalkeeper, unless it's a penalty shootout, saving a penalty and going, come on. Every defender does that. Every player on the pitch does that. And the goalkeeper's like, heads on, we got back in corner to finish, you fucking mugs. Like, it may be the most intimidating that a goalkeeper ever gets is when they've saved the penalty and trying to get everybody else to focus in. So I think it was more other players would celebrate it. But I think we are now in the age of me, aren't we? Like, so if a footballer makes a challenge, they're like, well, I've done something great, haven't I? They don't see it as, well, that's your job. And defenders are meant to pass out from the back, be ball distributors as well. So it's not, they're like, look, I'm passing, I'm distributing, and I can also put in a challenge. Look at me. That's going on the Instagram. And it will. That'll be on the Instagram feed, you know, even if they'll have lost 4-2, but they made one tackle in the 25th minute that was pretty good. And up on the Instagram feed with a heroic performance today, lads. Just couldn't get the job done. We'll be back next week. Always fighting. Hashtag Arsenal. Hashtag not going to win the Premier League. Like, I mean, it's just, yeah. I don't necessarily enjoy it. I think defenders should be able to take joy in doing what they do and doing what they do well. But I think a good defender gets a pat on the back from their teammates. Yeah, being a defender is a bit like being an offensive lineman in American football. You do your job. No one really notices it until you're breaking records and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's for other people in the team to go, oi, I know we're scoring 55 goals in the first 24 games of the season, but the fact we've kept clean sheets because of these guys, you want them to be the humble guys.
But that doesn't exist anymore, does it?
The leaders.
That, I mean, Rodri got Ballon d'Or. I mean, that kind of Makelele, the most underrated, underrated player. Like, it doesn't really exist. That kind of 7 seasons in. Oh, he's doing a great job, isn't it? It's not a thing anymore, as you say.
Rodri, City's collapse highlights how important Rodri is, and actually Rodri deserves the Ballon d'Or. If anything, this City collapse has just vindicated that Ballon d'Or win for Rodri, because like it's the same as the MVP award that you get in all these US sports. Who is the most valuable player to your side should be winning a Ballon d'Or, and obviously the most talented as well. So if you have great success and you're the most valuable player in that success, and everyone would look at, oh, I wouldn't have won it without Haaland's goals. Could take Haaland out of that City team, they'd find somebody else to score. You take Rodri out of it, the whole place collapses.
This is a conversation for another pod, but you could argue that Erling Haaland has collectively made that Manchester City side worse. He's an astonishing footballer, Ollie, but you could make the case that collectively... Anyway, this pod has wandered off in some mad avenues, so I'm going to add another one into the call.
Let's stay with... I was going to say let's stay with strikers and talk about what's happening with Arsenal.
Yeah, can I just add one thing in quickly? Because I looked at it 2 seconds before we hit record on the pod. Rene Higuita with the scorpion kick against Jamie Redknapp. Do you remember that? I saw that come up on Twitter. And I thought, Ollie, if that happened today, that would get 1 billion views. It's only because it happened in the late 90s, early noughties, that... obviously it's repurposed now and people look at it, but it doesn't get the same amount of views. Like, if Alisson did that, and by the way, for our younger listeners, Jamie Redknapp had a shot. It was in a friendly against Colombia, and Rene Higuita does something that I've never really seen a footballer do ever before or since. Like, it's the most mad. It's a scorpion kick. Like, what can you say?
It's so unnecessary.
It's complete. But you know what it was, Ollie? Because he thought the flag had gone up for offside in an earlier move, and it actually hadn't. So he was like, oh, I'm just going to have some fun here. It's a friendly. So he did the scorpion kick, and he makes the cleanest contact with it. But the flag hadn't actually gone up, and the play continued. I believe that's what happened. But anyway, if that happened today, like, Jordan Pickford did that. Anyway, get 1 billion views. Right.
But we were talking about... we actually had this conversation in an office a few weeks ago about Higuita, and we were talking about Chilavert, the Paraguayan goalkeeper. He's a goalkeeper that would consistently take and score free kicks and penalties.
Chilavert was incredible.
And... unbelievable, and scored from the halfway line in his career. And if that happened in world football at this point, everybody wants a ball-playing goalkeeper. Nobody wants a free kick, set-piece taking goalkeeper at this point, though. And if you had that, again, that is the most viewed Instagram football feed on the planet. And if he decides to make some TikToks as well and all that kind of stuff of, Chilavert's greatest moments in this modern era, you're talking about the most viewed footballer on social media. But they just don't want to do that anymore, and it's a shame. The great goalkeepers perhaps of yesteryear was like football kits. The greatest eccentric goalkeepers were saved for the 90s, and it doesn't matter how many 60-yard through balls Edison makes to set Manchester City up. You're never going to be Chilavert. I'm sorry.
Rogério Ceni, Ollie, the Brazilian goalkeeper. This will blow the mind of our younger listeners. In his career, he scored... Guess how many goals he scored in his career? Bear in mind, he was Chilavert on steroids, right? Like, took the pens, took every free kick. Without looking up, Ollie, guess how many goals over the course of his career he scored?
26.
132. Obviously, he's a keeper, so he had a 20-year career and always took the free kicks. But it would blow the mind of a Gen Z. Like, the goalkeeper genuinely used to come up. Chilavert, he was the free kick taker. Like, he'd come up and they'd put a couple of players back and he'd take the free kick. It was bonkers looking back on it.
He did it at World Cups for Paraguay. He did it Chilavert stepped up and tried to take free kicks for his national side at a World Cup. Like, beautiful. beautiful, eccentric 90s football that just would never happen today. You know, you have a Fabian Barthez as well, like who catches the attention because he's the pint-sized goalkeeper, and then you have Edwin van der Sar, who's the tallest thing on the planet, and again one of these great goalkeepers that holds records in English football for clean sheets and goals conceded in a season. But it's just not a patch on the eccentric drama of a South American goalkeeper.
Mate, I could do a whole pod on this because I've just done a miniature deep dive on the secondary laptop, Ollie. So Rogerio Ceni, it's 129 goals apparently officially. Second is Chilavert with 67 goals, but this is the greatest. The Paraguayan is the only goalkeeper in history to score a hat-trick in a professional game. All three goals came from the penalty spot for Vélez against Ferro Carril Oeste in 1999. The Paraguayan, who also played for Zaragoza and Strasbourg, also wants to score a free kick from his own half for Vélez against River Plate. I mean, Jose Luis Chilavert, yeah, if he existed today, well, he wouldn't exist, would he? Because he'd want to take a free kick when he was 11 years old, and a fucking coach would be like, no, you're a goalkeeper, get back in goal, and it would ruin the whole thing.
You're going to be our mental holding midfielder rather than our mental goalkeeper, is what Chilavert would become. And he'd just be like a free kick taking, almost Felipe Melo, would what Chilavert would end up being at this point. And he'd still be playing at 44 years old in in Brazil somewhere. I mean, that would have been the glory days to be working out in South American football when you had guys like that.
What do you think will go down as the absolute glory days in football? Because I think obviously not the 1990s kind of popularised football as part of pop culture. It became cool. You were coming off the back of like the hooligan era in England. And then I would say late 90s to probably like 2014 maybe, as like the absolute, like a pre-VAR, but before it all got a little bit too individualised maybe. I don't know. That I would say that will go down in history as the absolute golden era of football in terms of eyeballs on the sport, capacity to watch all these games, introduction of Sky and the globalisation of the Premier League, before maybe something started to get a bit negative.
I think you're looking at late 90s to just after Roman Abramovich took over Chelsea, basically. That's the window when football was peak, because Chelsea weren't walking league titles because of money completely. Like, they had to wait, they had to build, and you still had like United sides with Sir Alex Ferguson, etc. You also had the game now is based off the foundations that were made then. The only reason Manchester United have expectations is because at this point still in the Premier League is because of the success they had in that period of time and became the globalised, recognised brand club for English football. Arsenal's expectations have all been changed by that run in English football. And those that weren't there at the time, you know, when I started watching football, Oldham Athletic were in the Premier League. But they were there too early. If you were there pre-98, 99, you were there just too early. And that's why those clubs haven't got back. Swindon Town up in the top flight of English football. You know, it doesn't happen for you at that point. Whereas if you have stayed and been in the Premier League, aside from a few, like Bradford's maybe and such, you have maintained a reasonably good championship status, or you've had spells back in the top flight again. It's I think that was like the foundation of what we have with the modern football era.
I'm going to argue that the game peaked when Rogerio Ceni scored his 100th career goal, which was a free kick against arch rivals Corinthians to win the game. I would say that, or maybe even 1999 when Chilavert scores a hat-trick as a goalkeeper. Amazing.
The game peaked when Kaká sent that ball through to Hernan Crespo, and Crespo dinked it over Jerzy Dudek, and football should have stopped then at all, because that for me is the best goal in a Champions League final. Or like the Bale overhead kicks and all of that, but the pass and the finish are so unique, and football should have stopped then, including that night, but it didn't. It carried
Hot take: Zidane's goal against Leverkusen in a Champions League final is slightly overrated. I think the best two goals, I agree with you, that for an absolute purist footballing goal, the Kaká to Crespo for Milan's third is just an absurd, like the weight on the pass, Ollie, that he only needs that one touch is incredible. And Gareth Bale's goal, every time I see it, I'm like, how is this not talked about more? It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous goal.
Do you think it's because he's Gareth Bale and he's like, A, he's Welsh, and B, he just kind of didn't... It was so weird of like, he was a superstar in the Premier League, hit like international superstar status because he was the face of like NBC Sports kind of advertising when they made the push to take the Premier League and push it out to America a bit more in a kind of higher caliber broadcast. And then he went to Real Madrid, and because it was so up and down his time at Real Madrid,
there was lots of ups.
Don't think of Gary but yeah, for sure. Oh, I mean, some of the goals that he scored for Real Madrid
Copa del Rey final goal
in key moments. Yeah, when he goes all the way around the outside, he sprints off the pitch and still goes round. I mean, it's unbelievable. But because he's Gareth Bale, because there was this Wales Golf Madrid kind of a Wales Golf football kind of attitude that everybody said he had, when I don't necessarily think he really did, because look at the way that he played for Real Madrid in those big moments, in those key moments. He's always kind of a forgotten man. If Ronaldo scores that, if Bellingham scores that goal, like we're handing the Ballon d'Or on a plate,
100%.
you know?
And I think I remember watching an interview with Bale where he said that essentially he just didn't want to play the Real Madrid game. He wanted to go to training and then finish training, say, bye lads, see you tomorrow, get in his car and go home. He didn't want to do the Real Madrid thing of, you know, being buddies with this certain group and talking to Marca and doing a little side interview there and making sure that, you know, this person was happy and that. He literally just wanted to turn up, you know, go to training. And as soon as training was finished, he was straight in a car and out of there. And obviously that didn't sit well. And, you know, is it kind of rude as the outsider in a group coming in as a Welshman? Maybe, but also, as long as you're pleasant and polite, I don't think he's done anything terribly wrong there. But I agree, he's probably... I think history will treat him really kindly, Ollie, because when people think Gareth Bale Madrid, they'll think possibly the greatest Champions League goal final of all time and one of the most unique ways to win a Copa del Rey final ever with sort of running around the outside of the pitch. It was absurd, so... Right.
Where do we go from here?
Should we start the pod then?
It's a good job we got a running order, isn't it? Yeah.
The Premier League title race. Ollie, 13 games to play. Liverpool lead Arsenal by 7 points. Paint me the scenario of how, from this point, Arsenal can win the Premier League title. Paint me the picture of how it could happen. Because it absolutely could happen. And I believe there's a set of circumstances where I can envisage Mikel Arteta lifting that Premier League. But you tell me how you think it could happen from here.
Arsenal and their backline start playing like the backline that we've expected to be all season, and they go on a Burnley-esque run of not conceding goals, and they unlock the talents of attacking midfielder who they throw into that almost false nine role of Ethan Nwaneri. And when that happens... and they don't have to start relying on central midfielders coming off the bench to find a couple of goals to get them out of jail against Leicester. And instead, Ranieri is this playing with football and freedom and youthful exuberance. And they still have, obviously, the supporting cast to be able to feed deliveries into him. And they start playing this Spain-esque false nine perfectly. As I say, Mikel Arteta is able to adapt and not look like he's having a heart attack on the sideline every 20 minutes because he lives and breathes the game still so much and wants to be out there. Then Arsenal go on a run. And then Liverpool lose to City because Haaland's injury isn't going to be too bad next weekend, and a couple of cracks appear in Arne Slot's side because they're starting to get tired from playing so many games this season, and maybe they pick up some injuries due to that, which is what I thought Haaland's injury was going to be this weekend. You looked at that and thought, oh no, this is one of those ones where a player's just playing too much and something just goes at the worst moment. That's genuinely the only way. I think the victory for Arsenal this weekend was so important to even keep any shred of a stake in this title. And there was a long time against Leicester where you just didn't see it coming. You just thought, this is Arteta's worst nightmare of not knowing what to do without a centre forward after Kai Havertz's injury. And everybody was going to come for Mikel Arteta on Monday today if they hadn't found those goals to get past the Foxes. I mean, it would have been a savaging. You know, Arteta's mismanagement of the club, not bringing in enough depth, the arrogance of Arteta would have been called. And he knows that victory was hugely important just to give him a chance to go, right, how do I manage this situation? Because it's going to be a tough one for him to manage. Because Ollie,
I think it's tighter than you think.
Deeney came out with a... just how? I know...
Because it's 7 points and the two still have to play each other. I think it's tighter than you think. I think Martinelli and Saka will be back after the March international break. So I think just forget after the March international break. Think about the next 4 games I think there are before that break, right? Liverpool this week go away to Aston Villa and away to Manchester City. It's not inconceivable that they draw both of those 2 games, right? And Arsenal at home against West Ham are trash, and then they're away at Nottingham Forest, which admittedly is a very tough game. And West Ham fans would say that as well. By the way, we can talk about Graham Potter if you want. I'm absolutely convinced he's not the right man for West Ham, and I'm equally convinced that Jose Mourinho will be at that football club at the start of next season. But that's a different debate. So I can see Liverpool dropping points against Aston Villa and or Manchester City. I think they look super nervous against Wolves. I think that goal in the Merseyside derby will still hurt them. I still think Liverpool will win the league, but I think there's a path for Arsenal to win the league. I think that they've got 13 games left. I think if they win 12 and draw at Anfield, they'll win the league. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done without, essentially without your first choice front line. Ollie Wilson's scowling at me. 13 games left. If they win 12 and draw at Anfield, they win the Premier League title.
It's just such a wild thing to say. Like, so casually, so flippantly. Yeah, I mean, of course. Look, start of the season, I tell you what, if Arsenal win 36 games this season, I probably have them to win the title. You know what I mean? Like, we're dealing in full-blown hyperbolics and there is no point this year that you've thought Arsenal could go on a win 12
That's
and 13.
true. That's very true.
And I don't think, considering the depleted side they've got in the next few weeks, and we'll see what happens with Saka and Martinelli coming back. I don't think there is, even with those 2, you'd say, well, that's a guaranteed, that guarantees some wins against X, Y, and Z. And I think the annoying thing for Arsenal is that, like, they're one of those sides that teams just do want to raise their game against. Like the number of times that you've seen an Arsenal side get held up by a West Ham, even when they're at their lowest, at their worst, because it's just doable. And Liverpool have the same thing. We saw that in the last Merseyside derby at Goodison Park in midweek last week. I mean, that was a fantastic game of football, and I'd love to know what Arne Slot said to Michael Oliver, because that's one of the fastest red cards that you'll see coming out towards a manager.
Mate, the Premier League will break anyone, won't it? Arne Slot's this really super cool Dutchman, and Postecoglou walked into the Premier League saying, "Oh, I don't criticise the referees," and it's incredible how the Premier League will change everything. Wow,
that is 34 minutes into a podcast, and we've mentioned Ange Postecoglou for the first time. That is a new record on NASP. That's strong.
All right, let's wander into the Tottenham Man United game. First, before we talk Postecoglou, Ollie, Ruben Amorim in his first 14 Premier League games has 13 points, and Erik ten Hag in his last 14 Premier League games, I think, had 17 points. Ruben Amorim is still in 2 cup competitions, still in the FA Cup, still in the Europa League. So I think those 2 things might give him an opportunity to salvage a season, not even necessarily winning one of those 2 trophies, but going deep in one of them, in one of those 2 competitions. But I don't know. One of my biggest things with Amorim is how the media talk about him, because when the media talk about Ruben Amorim, you hear a lot about, I really like how he communicates, I really like how he talks to the media, I really like his demeanour, I really like his attitude, I really like his character. All you're trying to say is you like the look of a 40-year-old pretty Portuguese man. That's it. Because there's nothing that we've seen on the football pitch for Manchester United that would suggest that Ruben Amorim is going to be fantastic. Maybe he will be. It's a ridiculously crap situation for him to come into. Impossible job. Should never have taken it. But there's nothing in the first 14 Premier League games of his reign that would suggest he's going to be an overriding success.
No, and I think you saw this weekend the frustration, actually, that both Tottenham and Manchester United have had throughout this season, which is both of these sides can have spells where you think, oh yeah, they're getting right back into this. They are very much back in this game, and they can't make the most of opportunities to see ties out, to see spells of pressure turn into goals. I mean, it was actually a very entertaining watch, this Spurs United game. And the second half in particular, there's a good 15, 20-minute spell where United just kind of around that 18-yard box are having their best moment of the game. Amorim doesn't want to really change much or anything because he doesn't want to, you just got the feeling, I think Gary Neville actually said, we're at a point where you just feel like United are going to score, and it doesn't happen. And there's a huge difference, as you mentioned earlier, goals change games. Goals are what you're meant to do in football. You're meant to find goals. And if you can't find goals in those moments, it's suddenly a really tough scenario as a manager, because you're looking and saying, we're doing everything we can except finding that last touch to find the back of the net. And what's happening at Manchester United off off the pitch is going to impact what happens to him on the pitch as well, with all these kind of cost-cutting measures that are coming in. Another 200 people are going to lose their jobs at the club. It's absolutely disgusting how this football club is being run as a pure for-profit business rather than as a football club at this point. It summarises everything that's wrong in football as an industry of trim until our profits keep going up.
And the people losing their jobs, Ollie, they're just regular folk in Manchester, probably on 28, 34, 42 grand a year. Like, you know, it's just
half a week's wages for the average United player keeps that person maybe in a job for 2-3 years. You know what I mean? Like,
how are the players not disgusted with themselves when they see something like, oh, your deputy head of media has just lost his job and he's got a mortgage he can't afford and 2 kids, or the cleaning staff, like they're being cut back, or I don't know. How do the players, like, how do they deal with that? Like, obviously the players aren't making that decision, but it's just gross.
But they have no attachment to the club. You know, gone are the days, and it happens every so often with some players and some people at clubs where, you know, but used to hear so many stories about, Brian, who's always in the press room. You know, he's the one that just makes sure the press have got their teas and coffees, and he does the same for the players when they come into the dressing room. And everybody loved old Brian, and he's picking up a salary of, you know, 37 grand a year or something like that, just to be part of a club that he's loved, and he's seen every game, and they let him go and watch the game from just behind the stands and all that. And now it's like, well, Brian's out. He's costing us way too much. Players can make their own money, make their own tea and coffee. So he's gone. And those players used to have an interaction with him, speak to him on a daily basis, maybe get to know him, give him a signed shirt at the end of his season or at the end of his career there or something like that. And now these players walk in, headphones on, ignore everything, absolutely everything. They're mercenaries for hire, most of these football players across the board, let alone at Manchester United and big clubs. And they're there to make as much money as possible. And it's ripping away the livelihoods of other people when their failures on the football pitch after their extortionate demands on contracts are killing people's jobs elsewhere around the football club. It's a horrible way to run Manchester United. It's a horrible way to run it as a business. It's nothing that any football fan looks at and goes, well, at least they're making a profit. No football fan has ever said that about their club. They want titles and to be competitive and silverware and glory. Not, well, we've cut costs by 70 grand a year, so
yeah, I mean,
should mean a
Tottenham fans said to me, you know, we left White Hart Lane, we were in a title race, and now, you know, we got this brand spanking new stadium, and Tottenham are a different case to Manchester United, by the way, because they're actually run very sustainably, very intelligently, very cleverly as a football club. Just on Man United quickly, Ollie. I mean, yeah, it's disgusting and gross and like it's rank, but also just the mismanagement of money is so incomprehensible. You spent 85 million quid on Anthony. 85 million quid on Anthony. And yet you're sacking people on 28 grand a year. Like, it's absolutely gross. It's the equivalent of you, mate, being broke and taking out a 40 grand loan to buy a Rolex. Like, people would be like, Ollie, what are you doing, mate? You need help. Like, you need... Do you know what I mean? You need therapy. Like, you don't understand money. Like, stop what you're doing. There's an intervention. Like, it's absolutely bonkers.
It's also, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with, like, Paddy Power or anything like that. They do some great skits and stuff. But it's actually kind of sad to me that there are some people and places that have made, like, jokey, you know, sketches about what United are doing. You know, we're going to use each tea bag has to be used 4 times, all the cost-cutting measures, etc. Do you need the lights on and stuff? But we are actually joking about people losing their jobs at the end of the day. And yeah, it's funny to see perhaps the downfall of a big club like Manchester United, but it's not really funny to hear about Brenda in the tea room, who has been there for 25 years and is now going to be looking for employment elsewhere and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, it's ugly. It's the same in everything in this gig, though. Absolutely everything in this sports world. Is there are a few people making so much money at the top, and there is nothing, even when you think about things like production values, like sports coverage in general is just getting slashed at the knees, and it's a race to the bottom. Everybody's trying to make a living and make as much money, and there is so many people that are making all of the money, and none of it goes to anywhere where it really should.
Isn't that just the world, though?
How much more do people need? Yeah, it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm no socialist, but I'm no capitalist either, of like everybody deserves everything and we need to make as much money as possible, because there's no way that everybody can make as much money as possible. At the end of the day, you can't have 10 people making all of the money. It just doesn't work. until you do a Bill Burr thin out society. I mean, we are getting off piece. We're getting deep now.
It's just
annoyed me a lot.
Absolutely wild 42 minutes.
It's annoyed me a lot this week. It's annoyed me so much, this United thing, because I just look at everything.
Yeah, but I mean, anyone inside the industry, it's unsurprising, Ollie. I mean, it's completely unsurprising. Anyway, let's move on. So one thing that struck me this week is that, so in all likelihood, the way English sides are progressing in Europe, there's going to be 5 places in the Premier League for the Champions League next year. So 5 English clubs are going to be in the Champions League next year. What could genuinely happen is 7 English clubs will be competing in the 2025-2026 Champions League. And here's how. The top 5 in the Premier League qualify for the Champions League. Then, let's say Tottenham or Manchester United win the Europa League. That takes us up to 6 places, right? Then let's also say that either Manchester City or Aston Villa are not in the Premier League top 5, and yet they go on and win the Champions League. Probably, I think City are going to finish in the top 5. So let's say Aston Villa. So if Aston Villa win the Champions League and finish 8th in the Premier League, if Tottenham win the Europa League and finish 10th in the Premier League, and plus the top 5, we could end up with 7 English clubs in the Champions League next season. Thoughts, Ollie? It's not going to happen, probably.
I mean, it might not. The trouble for me is, and not to, we've got into grumpy old man mode now. There was a real positivity talking about 90s football and Chilavert and stuff, and now we've gone into Victor Meldrew mode, has just been engaged. So I'm so happy for clubs like Bournemouth and Forest to be as high up they are in the table right now, and genuinely would like them to stay exactly where they are or even higher until the end of the season, because I think it's a better story, it's a better narrative, and it shows the way that smaller clubs in football, or maybe should we say less competitive clubs in football, can break into the top 4, top 6, and gives hope for a lot of other teams. However, there was a commentator made a note this week of Bournemouth in the Champions League. That would be fantastic. What an achievement. It's the same as qualifying through the league phase in the Champions League and getting into the knockout stages this year. It's not really an achievement. Like, if it's obviously qualifying,
it is
Bournemouth being in the Champions League is more of an achievement, but the barriers to entry have been lowered so far that getting into Europe isn't necessarily achievement. We've discussed it about the Brazilian league, how the top 12, 13 sides go into continental competitions, and then the bottom 5 or 6 are in a relegation battle, and then there's about 3 spots in the middle of the league that are genuinely don't mean anything if you finish there. So the barrier to getting into a continental campaign in Brazil is so low that actually it's not impressive to get there. It doesn't mean as much. And I think we're getting, not at that point yet, but if you have 7 English sides in Champions League and then another, 4 sides going into Conference League and Europa League, etc., we're getting to that point where you're like, getting into Europe isn't that difficult, particularly compared to what it used to be. It used to be an honour to go and represent your nation, your league, in the Champions League. And now it's become, 7 spots are there. You'd hope. I mean, it's more damning on sides like Tottenham, Manchester United, etc. if they don't get there, because people go, well, you should be there. We've got a lot of space to fit you in here and you still can't get there. So it's still fantastic for Forest and Bournemouth, but
the barrier's been lowered for sure. I mean, look, it would be, if Forest, they're sat 3rd in the Premier League table, Bournemouth, I mean, it's very on. If you look at the form of, Chelsea, very patchy, Newcastle patchy, City, I think, are going to finish in the top 5 just because they found a little bit more form recently. It still would be achievement, but I take the point. I mean, 5 sides to get in the Champions League, and the possibility. I mean, I think English clubs are almost certainly going to have 5 sides, but I mean, Spurs could easily win the Europa League, I think. And then you got 6 sides in the Champions League next year. It's pretty ridiculous, but it is what it is. Okay.
The most embarrassing thing, just quickly, we do have to mention Brighton hammering Chelsea after Chelsea have paid so much money to Brighton over the years. It was a very good point raised by Joe Cole on the Saturday morning, but over $250 million Chelsea have paid for players and managers from that club. and Brighton still put them to the sword in the Premier League. I mean, it's a wonderful story. Brighton are another one of those sides that you can just hold hope for in English football, who keep finding a way to it. They're like the Atalanta of English football, I think. They just keep finding a way to adapt and bring new people in and just keep the success rolling. They just need to have one manager there for the full period, and you're looking at an Atalanta-esque story.
There's something funny as well, Ollie, about pre-season. Everyone was saying, Chelsea are mad. Why have they bought all these footballers? It's never going to work. And then Chelsea started the season really well. And it's like, Chelsea are in a title race. Maresca's a genius. Like, look, they've got such a great young squad. And now it's just gone back to, they bought too many players. Like, I mean, we're so fickle. Generally, we're so fickle. I'm sure a couple of months ago I was saying Chelsea are in the title race. Now it's, what are they doing? Like, they're a mess. Maresca out. Like, so it's, it's you got to embrace it. You got to enjoy it. It's why, when you'll see someone on social media saying something and then someone will dig out something they said 6 months ago, like, this you, bro. It's like, yeah, football changes so quickly. So saying like Chelsea are in a title race and then 3 months later being like, Maresca's got to go. It's like, that's football. So when people criticise, that Rory Jennings, they'll be like, you change your mind all the time. It's like, yeah. I watch football and there's games all the time. Like, things change as a result of what happens, and therefore my mind changes.
Also, if Maresca loses first 7 games this season, and then you say, well, he's obviously not got it for the Premier League, and then he wins 12 in a row, like Arsenal, according to Dave Windsor, are going to do in the run into the end of this season, you are going to say, you're allowed to change your mind and go, oh, he's done something, like he's changed and become better. I'm okay with it. Maybe not going the other way completely and saying he's the best manager in the Premier League that's ever been and all that kind of hyperbolic stuff. But yeah, you're allowed as an adult to change your mind based on the data that's put in front of you. Because if you didn't, you'd be insane. If you were sat there and going, Erling Haaland's never going to make it in English football, and you were still here going, nah, it's all going to fall apart soon, don't worry. Look at that knee going on the weekend. Look at that. He's falling apart. He's not going to be able to do it consistently. He's rubbish. Like, it's just not... It makes you look more mental if you're not willing to adapt than anything else.
Let's rattle through some European football quickly, Ollie, because I know we're a bit of a time crunch. Right, La Liga, because I'm covering it. A couple of things popped up this week that I thought was interesting. One is, we mentioned last week, Diego Simeone's been at Atletico Madrid since 2011, and they drew 1-1 over the weekend. But there's a point in the second half where Atletico Madrid are down to 10, and Diego Simeone is literally conducting the whole crowd, like ordering the whole crowd to sing. And it made me think, how many coaches can get away with that? You have to have so much in the bank to get away with that. He was angry at his own crowd because he wanted more, and he spent 30 seconds just G'ing them up. And I was thinking, there are so few football managers that A, will ever be able to do that, but B, will never even be able to dream of having such a connection with a football club that they can do that. So I thought that was a great moment, and I think this...
Well, it takes a special manager to even do that, because you think about, your Wengers, your Fergusons, they'd never think about the crowd. Or they may do, but they'd never show it. They'd be stood on the sideline because they're focused in on the game 100%. Whereas I like the fact that Simeone's going, there's something missing here. There's something missing here. And he looks and realises, like, come on, lads. Like, it takes a completely unique character to have the balls to do that, let alone have that connection and the ability to G them up, to actually realise that if we can get the crowd behind us, that's what we need. And you see it so often with some managers kind of on the sideline trying to get the crowd going, and it doesn't really work. And if they're going through a sticky patch, they sod off. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful moment.
And, they can still win the Copa del Rey, still in the Champions League, and I think they're 1 point off the top of La Liga table, or 2 points. So, yeah, it's very... The treble's still on for Diego Simeone. Elsewhere in La Liga. So, what do you think about this? And I decided I was going to message you about this. I'm going to stop swearing on Not Another Sports Pod because I feel like the algorithm's against us if we swear, Ollie, and I'm a bit of a swearer. But I am going to swear for this because Jude Bellingham did, and I need to explain it. So, in Spain, if you swear at the referee, you're in big trouble, essentially, whereas in England, you can kind of get away with it. And Jude Bellingham was talking to the referee, and he turns his back, and he says, fuck off. And the referee interpreted that as, fuck you. And so he sent Bellingham off, and now Bellingham's in big trouble. And now the lip readers are coming into play. And the difference, obviously, is a fuck off could be, in English, to a native English speaker, fuck off is often just like, fuck off. Like, it's just the world, the situation, myself, fuck off. It's like, there's a big difference between fuck off and fuck you. And, for a Spanish referee to try and interpret that is obviously a little bit difficult. Anyway, Bellingham was sent off. Real Madrid dropped points and have kind of let Barcelona and Atletico Madrid back into the title race. But Do you think you should be able to swear at referees?
I understand it's going to happen. I don't necessarily like it because we are continuing to talk about the whole, we need to respect officials, you shouldn't gather around them. But, like, football's just a foul-mouthed game. And I think there are a lot of people that will stand there and say in the heat of the moment during a football game about anything, oh, fuck off. So I just think it's going to happen, and either referees need to understand when it's actually a really aggressive getting in the face, or whether it's that kind of just back off kind of thing in the heat of the moment. I mean, one of the funniest things I saw this week was the Eagles Super Bowl parade on Philadelphia TV, and they have like speeches throughout the day. They're trying to interview players as they're going through the streets of the city, and the poor guys on the Fox News broadcast, that every single time one of the players swore because they've had a few drinks and they're just really pumped to see the crowd out there and stuff. They were trying to cut the sound whenever there was a swear word, but it just wouldn't happen. And it was over and over and over again. And it's just what you're going to get. These guys are athletes at the end of the day. They particularly in the heat of battle, in the heat of a game in general, they're going to have that level of tenacity that foul language is going to be used. You hear it used by managers all the time, let alone the players on the pitch. So I think it's just something that you can't be too finicky. I'm not saying it should be acceptable to be swearing as much as they do, but I just think that is unfortunately the game that we have and the athletes that we have. And we are past that in society where swear words, I think, are so commonly used in film, TV, etc., that you just have to you can't treat them as in, oh, saying a swear word to the official is so terrible. Telling an official to F off is so disastrous. It's like, worse things happen at sea, guys.
Harry Kane apparently has got a £67 million release clause. Don't think we spoke about this last week, Ollie.
No.
Yeah, £67 million for, I think it'd be 32 in the summer. I think Premier League...
cheap for a guy that's probably got 2 great years still left in him.
I mean, Ollie, he's still a goal-scoring machine. Like, he's a goal a game for Bayern in close to 2 seasons now. He's still an absolute goal-scoring machine. I think if you're Chelsea, if you're Man United, if you're Liverpool, if you're Arsenal, then I think you got to be looking at Harry Kane and thinking, that is, in a world where Dominic Solanke goes for 60 million, in a world where John Duran goes to Saudi Arabia for 70 odd, in a world where Alexander Isak's valued at 150, 200 million pounds, Harry Kane is at least, as you say, for 2 years, I'd say 1 or 2 seasons, Harry Kane is a guarantee of Premier League goals. And can you imagine Harry Kane playing up front for Mikel Arteta's Arsenal? I mean, how is he not scoring 30 goals if he stays fit? And by the way, don't think, like, if you think Harry Kane can't go to Arsenal, you don't understand football. You really don't. Because Luis Figo crossed the divide and went from Barcelona to Real Madrid. Like, players have gone from Rangers to Celtic, from Liverpool to Manchester United, from Boca to River. Like, if you don't think Harry Kane can go to Arsenal, you do not understand football. Because crazy things happen in football. Liverpool came from 3-0 down in a Champions League final, scored 3 goals in 6 minutes. Like, you know, insane
Big
stuff.
Sol Campbell.
Insane stuff happens in football, Ollie. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility. If Harry Kane was a truly loyal man, he would have stayed at Tottenham, not fled to Bayern Munich to win a cheap Bundesliga title when they've won 11 of the last 12 years or whatever, or 10 of the last 11 years. So if Harry Kane was truly loyal to Tottenham, he would have stayed. He's obviously not loyal. He's gone to Bayern Munich. Do not think that Harry Kane can't go to Arsenal, because he can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? Arsenal getting back into a title fight, if they'd made that move in January, would have been so much sweeter if it was all down to Harry Kane. There isn't a world where there is an Arsenal fan that doesn't want to see Harry Kane. At the moment, oh no, I'm never having Harry Kane. Wouldn't want him to play for Arsenal. As soon as he pulled on that shirt, you'd have been every Arsenal fan on the planet. Yeah, this is great. This is superb. We've got a playmaker and a goal scorer all in one place. Like, fantastic.
100%. Let's go other sport very quickly, Ollie. Yannick Sinner, the men's world number 1 tennis player, has got a 3-month doping ban. Now, he was found guilty of ingesting a substance called closterbol. and Klosterbol, I don't know why I put it in inverted commas, like Klosterbol, and he was found guilty of ingesting this substance. Now, his explanation is that he was getting a massage from someone who had Klosterbol in their system, and somehow during the course of this massage, it's gone into his system and he's then tested positive. I mean, that's possible. Maybe it's on the hands, it goes into a cut or something. I don't know quite, the biology of that. But that's how Jannik Sinner has been found guilty of ingesting Klosterbol. Now, here's where it gets a little bit messy for me. Jannik Sinner, a few weeks ago, won the Australian Open, one of the 4 Grand Slams in a tennis calendar. And there he is with the trophy. Bear in mind, all this doping stuff happened last year. Jannik Sinner wins the Australian Open, and he's got a 3-month ban now, which, by the way, ends 2 weeks before the French Open starts, the next Grand Slam. In fact, it ends just before, I think, the Rome Open, which Jannik Sinner, as an Italian, will be favourite to go there and win. And it's the perfect build-up for the French Open. So he's been given a ban at the perfect time. It's the equivalent in football of Mo Salah or Messi getting like a 2 or 3 month ban that starts right at the end of the Premier League season, and they miss a Community Shield or a couple of pre-season tournaments, but they're back for the first day of the league season. So it is the most convenient ban in sport that I've seen recently. Stan Wawrinka, the former Swiss player, said he doesn't believe tennis is clean anymore. Nick Kyrgios called it a disgrace. Tim Henman said it was pretty fishy, etc., etc. So people aren't happy about it. I actually think that Jannik Sinner has probably just made an innocent mistake. I think for tennis players, it's incredibly difficult. They have to be careful about every single thing that enters their body, from medication because they got bitten by a mosquito to the type of honey they eat to, what they consume on a plane. Like, it is really difficult. But at the same time, I mean, Jannik Sinner, drugs cheat or just a innocent mistake from a young man?
I think it's interesting that obviously all of the mutual consent around this still allows him to be in the French Open, and it always just, the cynic in me will always look at this and go, "Oh, you've got your plea deal. The ATP, don't want to see you not playing in the French Open as the world number 1, and you want to be playing in majors."
Just to add to this, to give it a tiny bit more context.
Sorry. Number 1.
Sorry, Ollie, to interrupt you, mate. Just to give a tiny bit more context, the World Anti-Doping Agency, so they wanted a 2-year ban, and he negotiated it down to 3 months. Like, I don't quite know how that's possible. Like, there are rules or there are rules. Like, what is it? But they've since admitted that he did not intend to cheat. But they wanted 2 years. It's gone down to 3 months. Sorry, you were saying that's just the added context.
But that's the thing. If they decide, there's going to be outside pressure, right, from ATP to ensure that WADA don't go too heavy and ban him for 2 years, because that's just the world we live in, where your top athletes are so valuable to the sport in general that you can't afford to not have them there, and you can't afford to have tennis be tarnished at that level as the world number 1. There are very few sporting outlets that have gone pretty ruthless on these sorts of scenarios, unless you get to the point where it's Lance Armstrong and it's like clear as day, plain and obvious, and that you have all of your titles stripped away.
What a legend,
basically.
By the way, on the Dream Board is an interview and not another sports pod and Lance Armstrong. That's on the Dream Board.
Really?
Mate, I sat down with Lance.
Yeah, but what are you going to ask him that hasn't been asked already?
I'm not going to ask him anything. I'm going to say you're a bloody legend. Like, you absolute evil genius. Like, mate, you got half the world wearing the yellow. Like, you're a madman. Like, what are you doing, Lance? But also, I don't know. Like, yeah.
What would Lance do? Armbands or whatever they were?
The guy was despicable. Like, it doesn't matter that everyone was cheating. It's like, your ethics, bro, are absolutely in hell's toilet. But by the way, if you're listening, Lance, like, we would love to have a chat and like hear your side of the story.
I mean, I've heard his side of the story. I think we all know the whole story at this point with Lance Armstrong. My thing would be like, well, he's just, yeah, I mean, it takes, I think you called it there, an evil genius. It's a diabolical genius, but there is genius still in there.
Cool.
That's the thing. Like, there is still genius in there to cultivate that scenario and that situation where you are pretty much untouchable for so many years. And I'm not necessarily saying this is happening with tennis, but what I am saying that is it's been worked out in a mutually beneficial scenario for the world number 1 and for world tennis that WADA don't bring in a 2-year ban. And I would like to know more details about A, why the ban hasn't been brought in, and B, what was the reason for them wanting a 2-year ban? Because accidentally or not, you're still cheating the sport. That's my thing. So whether you do it accidentally or not, it is on you to be and your team to make sure that you are not ingesting any sort of performance-enhancing drugs into your system via massage or anything else. So, and look, if you balls up, you balls up, and there should be repercussions. I'm not sure that it's enough. The cynic in me is raised eyes, very sceptical at this whole point. But yeah, it's fine. Let him go. They'll either have ruthless cheating that WADA adopt, or have all the steroids. And let's see what sort of
I know
Disney Plus Red Hulk style creatures that we can create.
But isn't there's some fella that wants to create the Olympics, the doping Olympics? I can't remember what he's called it. The Enhanced Games or something like that?
Yeah.
Ollie, he'd be a great person to get on the pod if we... it might be something for the summer to delve into. Right, last 5 minutes, Ollie. Talk to us about golf. The floor is yours.
Let's talk about Ludvig Åberg, who is the young Swedish talent who picked up his victory on the PGA Tour this weekend in such impressive fashion. So Maverick McNeely, real name Maverick, great name, is it having an absolute Maverick? Yeah, I think he was named after a car, they were saying, and his kids are also named after cars as well, which is just like so wonderfully American. I think it's fantastic. Obviously, then you've got the Top Gun Maverick and all that kind of stuff. Look, Dave, just stop being such a miserable cynic and enjoy the fact that somebody's called Maverick. Jeez, I'm trying to get out of Victor Meldrew mood, and you're like, nah, what a shit American name that is. God. Anyway, so Maverick McNeely's having like the round of his life at Torrey Pines this weekend. It's the Genesis Invitational. It's a tournament that's kind of run and hosted by Tiger Woods. There's all this emotion around the weekend because Tiger Woods' mum passed away this week, and players are wearing a kind of a pin to show that they're kind of in support of this woman that really did support Tiger through so much of his career, and Tiger's very emotional about it. He comes on the broadcast on Sunday. He's dropped out of the tournament this week because he doesn't want to play, but he's still willing to go on CBS and have that conversation. And this was also a tournament that was meant to be played in LA, where it's normally hosted, but due to the wildfires, there's been a mad scramble to move it down to San Diego, to Torrey Pines, to keep this tournament going this year. And obviously the PGA wouldn't want to miss out on one of their big competitions, one of their signature competitions. And so Maverick McNeely's having the round of his life. We also have on the final day Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy as a twosome going out, who are about 4 shots off the lead going into the last day, which is for the world number one, and for Rory McIlroy from what we saw last week at Pebble Beach is very much an attainable margin to pull back on the leaders. And so you're watching that initially of those two going out, and you're watching Scotty Scheffler carve up Torrey Pines and just look every bit the world number one, and nothing is dropping for Rory. Can't make a putt happen, hasn't made it happen all week, and it will start to raise the questions of, well, Rory can do it, but can he keep doing it and really push Scheffler and be that world number one? And then suddenly, Ludvig Åberg on his final round, he's only turned pro, 2 years ago, just before the Ryder Cup in 2023. And Åberg goes out, has 2 birdies in the first 3 and then 2 bogeys, which is where you then lose a shot to the rest of the field in a row. And so at the 5th hole, the kind of TV coverage, we're dropping out. We kind of see him not being in the race at all today. And then suddenly he has birdies on 7 and 9. And they cut to him on the 9th hole, and he's got an eagle putt, and it goes in the end for a birdie. And you're like, oh, Ludvig suddenly clawing back here. And the calmness of this young Swede, who is just so wonderfully quiet and has that like stoic demeanour of nothing's going to rattle him. When he misses putts, he still gives like a smile of just like, oh well, like the shrug emoji basically. And when he makes big putts, it's also the shrug emoji. He's just brilliantly level-headed. He has one of the best looking golf swings on the planet right now. And he's been sick for the start of this season. So he's dropped out of a couple of competitions being really unwell. And he suddenly at Torrey Pines, you've got a really hard stretch to finish of 14, 15, 16, 17 before a par 5 18th where you can get eagle or at least birdie, or the big guys would expect themselves to get birdie. And he birdies 13, 14, 15 to pull himself right back alongside Maverick, who this is why the name works fantastically, Dave, because suddenly when you start saying Maverick's in the lead, but Åberg's coming up behind him, that's when it looks good. And Maverick has a couple of rogue balls off the tee towards the end of the round and kind of starts to bottle it a bit at the end and ends up only getting a par on the last par 5, which suddenly leaves Åberg one off a joint leader going down the 18th. And Åberg just has this booming drive, full of confidence, dead centre of the fairway. stripes of wood towards the back of the green, and then two putts, this massive two putt down the hill to end up picking up the birdie and picking up the victory by a shot. And it's just so good watching young elite athletes that are so likable win in big moments. And not only that, now you've had Rory winning at Pebble Beach in the US. You've had Ludwig winning at Torrey Pines this week in the US. These are key members of Luke Donald's Ryder Cup team that's going to be coming up, obviously, in September later on this year, that are winning in America. And so you suddenly get the US players and the US audience thinking, yeah, these Europeans actually are doing pretty well still on US soil. Bethpage Black could be a bit more of a fight. It's just building up so early on. You know, Justin Rose and Shane Lowry have had really good performances at Pebble Beach a few weeks ago and stuff. It's just building up. This golf season is preparing to be, I think, potentially one of the best, regardless of all the crap that's happening with LIV and the PGA. It's building up to be a really good year of great golf, and I'm so excited for it.
There's something about as well, mate, a ice cool Scando sports star. And there's something that, like the Viking thing, it's still there somewhere, like your Bjorn Borg back in the day, and you get it a little bit with, Haaland's kind of that ilk, and who's the F1 driver, I can't remember, the Finnish guy.
Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah, like, there's something about that monosyllabic, devil-may-care, shrug of the shoulders, like, stoicism that you got to love in a Scandi sports star. LIV and PGA are going to merge, though. Is this just an ongoing thing? I mean, I always hear this pop up. I'll sort of scan an article here or there. It seems to pop up every week.
Greg Norman's been pushed out. LIV were in Adelaide this week, and that's like their big party. I mean, they're all trying to be a party venue, but this is where they're really like chucking beers everywhere, the Australians and stuff like that. And Joachim Neiman wins, which is obviously a big name who has been playing a bit on the European Tour as well this year, and will be wanting to get himself involved in things like majors at the top end of the year. And the new LIV chairman who's come in to replace Greg Norman has been talking about how the best place, if you want to see the best golfers on the planet right now, the only place to watch it is LIV, which just isn't true, but they do still have enough great golfers there. It'll happen. Donald Trump's getting involved. Everyone is, like, a lot of big names in golf have had sit-down meetings with Donald Trump, and he is desperate, apparently, to get the game all back together again. He wants to be the guy that's going to save golf. I mean, it's 1 minute it's Ukraine,
next minute it's the golf. Like, you know, it's just.
I mean, golf is going to be fixed by the president. You don't get more red, white, and blue than that. I think it just doesn't get better. And again, it's going to be a US deal with Saudi. I mean, this is what America does. We make golf great again by doing deals with the big oil guys. It's just, yeah, it'll happen.